You have an ideation stage and then go to market and then scale. So we are finally at that stage where we are scaling up now. We have entered the market, we have the revenues, initial numbers that have proven the model, the price, unit economics. And now we are focusing on scaling up and getting into 2025 cities in next 1 year, where we have a distribution model where dealers have
further session. So, Suchita.
Thank you, Kriti ma'am.
I, Sushita Yadav, Coordinator IIC KNIT Sultanpur, welcomes you all. It's time to unveil our fourth guest, Shruti Pandey, founder and CEO of Structure Eco, who left her cushy job in the New York City and headed to spend a year in the rural India. Traveling the length and the breadth of the country, she discovered endless possibilities to reinvent the existing practices in the construction industry. And that's how Structure Eco was born. It harnesses the potential of an agricultural residue to build structures which are cost effective, sustainable, and exhibit a lower carbon footprint. They aspire to consume less and create more. Now, I will hand over the mic to Shubham sir.
Thank you, Suchita. As rightly said by Jim Rohn, if you are not willing to risk the unusual, you have to settle with the ordinary. Today, here, I, Shubham Pandey, welcome you all with a lady who truly justifies these words, Ms. Shruti Pandey, on behalf of my whole team of IIC KNIT Sultanpur. It's a great honor and a pleasure to have you, ma'am, here today. And we are greatly obliged and overwhelmed to have you here. I am sure that the audience will be very excited to hear from you about your company and the story behind it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and speaking of structure, the name itself is quite fascinating. So would you like to tell us something about how you came up with this name for your company?
Sure. Thank you. So it was quite spontaneous how we came up with the name. So usually we talk about structures, and our every structure is made of straw. So we just thought we'll do a sarcastic twist to it and change the word structure to structure, which means that every structure that we made utilizes straw in it, which was also a way of saying that we are not hiding what we're doing. We are not trying to in any way lessen, because often what companies try to do when they're doing something really path-breaking or different, they try not to talk too much about it because we're not so sure if your consumer would really connect or would buy into it. On the contrary, we thought we'll just directly start from the name itself, be open very much as to what we do, and then get the consumer to buy into it.
Okay, so the actual idea behind the name was the components or the basic idea that the company is actually doing. So that's very innovative. So the now, like every startup has something unique in itself, just like yours. So one of the most demanded and the common question among all of our audience was that how did you came up with this idea behind your startup? Because it actually takes very guts to actually step into a market and introduce something new, which is already established from many centuries, like the building materials that you're supplying. So how did you came up with this idea?
Thanks. I would, our company got registered legally in June 2018, but I like to say that the idea was conceptualized in 2017 in September, so it's technically 3 years so far. And I was living in a village doing a Youth for India fellowship, which is where I saw stubble burning happening for the first time. It's not that I didn't know about it until then. I did because I was living in Delhi before I moved to New York. So in the winter season, it was quite a common thing to hear on the news channel about the stubble burning. But because when you finally see it physically happening and you see at first hand what it does to the farmers who are the closest to the impact, is when it was very difficult for me to unlearn what I had seen. And so I kept thinking about it, and the remaining 4 months of my fellowship, which was until November of 2017, I kept finding and researching ways how I could help the farmers. And that is where my background of civil engineering, building materials came into scope. And I realized that there's a lot of scope to convert this wasteless resource into a viable product, which not only would, stop stubble burning, it also addresses another big industry, which is construction, which is the second biggest emitter to carbon emission globally, and at the same time has so much potential to generate jobs and, contribute to the GDP of any country. So it just seemed like a solution that was trying to hit a lot of right tunes, and I just felt I was at the right moment to think of it. When I thought of it, I didn't know how to go about it, which is something I think a lot of startups face. Is when you have an idea, you don't know how to go about it. And the best thing is to not really get into the technicality of, registering a private limited company. Should I raise investments first? It's first about just testing the ground, testing the idea, which in the startup lingo is known as MVP, which is minimum viable product. So in my case, it was a more physical product. It wasn't a software. It was actually building a structure. And we did literally that. We built a house using this straw by compressing it into a building material. And when we felt it has value is when we went ahead and then next year registered a private limited company. So those things kind of get clear on your way. You first really need to believe in the idea itself and see, what potential it has, because you're the only one who's really betting on it at that point of time. And everything else, the business model, finances, funding, comes much later.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So actually, I'm actually looking forward to ask a question of mine that was related to the engineering field, because actually, as you said that you have a civil engineering background, and most of the civil engineers in our country go for either the government job or the government sector job, because it's a very vast area for a civil engineering or a mechanical engineering background guy. So actually, how did you came up with so much guts that I have to go in this specific field that's actually creating carbon emissions, and I have to solve that idea. So was your family supportive of that?
Thank you. So I agree with you. Like even when I was doing my BTech in civil engineering from Site Krishna Institute, I think almost 80% of the strength of the students with me, they were studying for their masters. They were trying to get either into the the IES or the other government PSU. So that's usually the core job prospectus for a civil or a mechanical engineer for our core branches, unlike CS and IT. So when I was doing my BTech, I didn't really thought of this. I just always had a lot of interest in what I was studying, engineering, and I think that is something which lately has changed a lot. Like often people end up doing engineering not knowing why so. Like there's so many jokes around it, which is true. But I was someone personally for whom it was actually my first preference to study civil. It wasn't, my sort of first preference, or wasn't getting a good college. So I went for what I wanted to do, and so I did my master's after my BTech, which was again part of why I was so interested in engineering. So I wanted to just learn more, and I just felt going to another country where they have a much better way of teaching and also content-wise. So I explored that, and it was actually the fellowship which made me realize that there's so much scope in building materials as well to innovate, which unfortunately construction as a industry, I don't think has innovated in centuries, like not even decades. It's easily 80, 90 years. If we go and we just look up, like the way you write down, oh, let's Google a tech startup. If you go and write a build tech startup, I don't think you would find any. I did that research myself a year back, and I could find one startup in Israel. So it was not, I think when you're in that point doing something, you're not really thinking too much about it. At least that was the case with me. Like when I was thinking of starting the company, I wasn't thinking, oh, it's a big deal. You have like a narrow vision because you're only thinking about the idea. As compared to my family, touchwood, my family has been very supportive throughout. Like even when as a woman I wanted to get into civil, my parents never asked me twice, not even once, like take CS, IT or something else. They 100% supported me. And even when I wanted to continue studying further in that field, or when I moved back to India to start this startup, they have always been supportive.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to point out that you said that you don't have that mainstream perspective towards your profession for civil engineering, and you love studying what you are studying. That's actually rare. That's actually rare in India.
Yeah.
Now, one of the questions that lies in our core Indian household beliefs that is the stability of life. And actually, as you pointed out, that you have been brought up in Delhi, then you went to New York for a stable job, got a job there. So, what brought you back to India, building your own company from scratch in just a small village? Because I'm sure that it must be very hard building such a big company in a small village after coming from that metropolitan cities. So, what all challenges did you face, and how did this story came up?
I mean, of course, it was a big transition. I still very clearly remember I flew back to India in October of 2017, and it was almost reaching to 0 degrees in New York. And when I landed in India, it was still not winters here. So it was like a very drastic even weather difference. And I went directly to Madurai, Chennai, like Tamil Nadu, for our orientation for the fellowship. And before I could really get acclimatized with the weather back here in India, we were sent to the villages. I had no idea of what I was getting myself into, and I think sometimes that's a good thing. When you try to plan everything out, you often end up not risking because when you're trying to plan it out, how can you plan for living in a village? When actually I personally have never lived in a village or been to a village until 2017. That was my first experience, and it ended up being a very intensive experience because I lived there 24/7 for 13 months. So had I, planned it a lot, I don't think I would have even thought of doing that or taking that leap of faith. So I think often when people take such decisions, it's often spontaneous, and sometimes you just have to do certain things, grab those opportunities, and then see what you can make out of it. Living in the village was, it was a great experience. I think I learned more there than anywhere else in my life, but it was also a very different experience. And what I learned the most there was that I think me and a lot of other fellows had to go through a process of unlearning, because you're landing from New York, you're like, oh, I've done my master's, I know so much, and I'm going to go and help these people. You come with that mindset. And when you land there and you realize in few weeks that there's nothing that you know could really help them or their situation, because they're in a situation that you have no idea about. So that's what I did in the first 3 months of my fellowship. I didn't try to help anyone. I didn't tell them what to do. The first thing I tried to do was learn their language. So the village I was living in was a tribal village. So they didn't even speak Hindi. They spoke a language called Kurku, which is a very tribal vernacular language. And it's not even a written script. So I actually learned from women by living with them, speaking with them, so that I could actually communicate with them. And I just tried to first build that level of trust with the ladies so that they could even open up to me or talk to me, And when that trust was established, which was the hardest thing and took the longest, was when they let me into their world. They let me go to the villages with them. They showed me how to rear goats, cows, how to, farm. And when they started letting me do those activities with them is when I realized what the problems were at the core in each of these livelihood solutions or problems. And that is where then, because I was coming from a certain background, I tried to see how I could help them. So we created a farmer producer organization, which is basically a farmers private limited company. It's a business model where a group of farmers come together and they put in a small amount of their shares and try to work together, because a small farmer can never have enough asset to start something of their own alone. So that was actually my first company that I ever started with or worked for. So we were a group of 486 women. It was 486 women FPO. They all contributed 500 rupees. We had a paid-up capital of a couple of lakhs, and we started doing collective goat rearing and raising cows, something I had no idea of. So I actually learned how to take care of cows and goats before I could even tell them. So it was like, it was a very give and take relationship there. They taught me how to milk a cow, and I taught them how to create a marketing model around, collectively selling the milk for the cows. So there was something that I could give, and there was so much that they could give in return. And unless that relationship established, you can't learn. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from the fellowship, is to always be open to learn. So even if I'm talking to someone, it's my team now in the company, or a new client, or someone who, let's say, does not agree into what we are doing, or is not in support of it, there's always something to learn. if you're open to, and you let that, give and take relationships happen. So overall, I think more than the hardships, I've learned so much more from that relationship that if given a chance again, I would do it definitely again.
Absolutely, ma'am. You have to step out of your comfort zone in order to learn. And actually, ma'am, you have set up a great model for entrepreneurship partnership. Actually, by showing that you just have to give the marketing model, and you will get the labor and the skills from the other persons.
Yeah.
So the main ideology behind structure has been to provide a housing that is more affordable and more sustainable. So our audience must be very keen to know that how actually do you do it? How actually do you provide a sustainable or affordable housing material?
Sure. So what we do at our core is anything is or can be genuinely sustainable if the complete life cycle of any material, whether it is for building or let's say, a mobile that we use. Every mobile that we use these days, and when we go and we buy a new phone, the phone that we give away, we don't know what happens to it. And that is where these products are, unsustainable because that electronic waste is created because they are not disposed of properly. And that's the problem in the build space as well, that every time we build any new structure and it is demolished, we don't know what happens to the concrete or the brick or the cement that goes in. 95% of it is basically lying out there in landfills or is dumped. That emits carbon dioxide. And at the same time, when these materials are made at the first step, when raw materials come together to make concrete or cement, carbon emission is emitted there too. So from the start to the end of a product is how you calculate whether a product is negative or positive footprint. So the product that we make, what we do is we collect a straw, which is a renewable source, because we are not destroying any natural resources or taking away any natural resource to make this straw. It is a byproduct of a crop. So every time you harvest rice, wheat, sugarcane, this byproduct will be generated. You're not forcing it to the environment. And then this straw is collected, converted into a building material by being compressed in a factory. And in that process as well, we don't use any water. We don't use any fossil fuel to do that production process, where again, it doesn't create any offset. And finally, after using this product in a building, when you demolish that building in 60 or 70 years, that panel can be taken back to a factory and biodegraded. So that is how the complete value chain of this product happens to be negative carbon footprint. So we are storing carbon instead of generating it out there in the environment. In last 1 year, all the construction that we have done, we have stored around 150 metric ton of carbon dioxide. And our goal is in next 5 years to store enough carbon that is equivalent to planting 20,000 trees by anybody. So that's how we gauge our impact metric of a company. Is every square meter of construction that we do or someone else does using our material, how much carbon gets stored and how much does that contribute to the climate change or the reduction of the carbon emission in the environment. And lastly, this material happens to be 20% cheaper than your traditional material. So if you make a table or a chair out of this versus wood, you will end up spending 20% less. If you're making a wall out of this panel, the same thing. So overall cost of construction is lesser. The time taken to build is less because it's a modular way of building. These are big long panels instead of smaller pieces of brick. And lastly, it's 100% sustainable product. So you're not depleting the nature as well.
Clearly, ma'am, you are thinking of Mother Nature first before you, and actually, we all have to do that. And actually, you have set an example that someone's waste can be someone's asset. So, yeah actually. So, now speaking of location-wise, as you said, as we all in our team knows that you have established a startup in your own hometown, that is Gorakhpur. So why not go to some big metro cities like Delhi, Mumbai, where you have big investors to invest a company upon? So why did you establish there?
I personally don't think that you have to be in a city for investment or funders to come to you, because the reason being, once you really validate the product that you have or the business model that you're working towards, it's often when you talk to people in the startup ecosystem, they feel like the founders are at a negative, end of the bargain where you're asking for money But I know as many investors as well personally as friends, and if you talk to them, you'll realize that if we are starting for investors, they are starting for good startups. So it's actually the same relationship. So they also desperately looking. So I was very clear that not being in Delhi or Mumbai was not a disadvantage unless we really, cannot prove the model itself. I started out from Gorakhpur, which was a very logical decision because of the constraint of resources. That is the case with most startups. When you start off, you have less of everything: people, team, human resource, money. So I started off from my hometown so that I could use some of the advantage that I have there, for some of the things that I might not have to pay for, and I can use my connections, take the help of my parents. So I did that. Now we actually have 2 offices in Gorakhpur and Delhi. We are part of fellowship in India, internationally in New York as well. We have been funded by a New York organization, IIM Calcutta, as well as an Indian funding institute. The point is that I don't think being in Gorakhpur is a limitation, or being in any tier 2, tier 3 city is a limitation. As long as your model is solid, as long as what you're pitching for has been proven by your unit economics, by everything that goes into it, and funders will find you as the way you can find them. To be very honest, and especially when we all live in today's age of internet, I don't think you really have to physically go anywhere to find anybody. Everyone is out there on LinkedIn, on internet. So that's how I find people. That's how investors find us. So I don't think the city has ever been a challenge for us. It has only been helpful to start from a smaller city.
Yeah, but in our perspective, you are looking at the brighter side of the day, because actually you are looking at the brighter side of Gorakhpur, not at the drawback that they actually was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So actually you told us that you have gone through a tribal village, learned a language that was not actually scripted. So it has been very challenging for you to step in the market also. So will you be interested in sharing some of the challenges that you faced while stepping into the market, and how did you cope up with them for the audience?
So I think we were very realistic starting out that, knowing that we exist in an industry which is very slow paced, where innovation doesn't happen every other month that you read about. We went in with this lower expectation that it will take time, that it will take much longer for us to convert one person or one organization to buy into this material, whether it's an architect, the designer, builder, or the government. So we went slow. We also were aware that it's difficult to do things alone. So from the very start, Structure has been very good in partnering up with other organizations in terms of implementation, in terms of collaborating, or even getting support. So we have been incubated from the very start in one of the other incubators. From Venice to IIM Bangalore, IIM Calcutta as of now, even few US-based incubators. So we have always tried to take as much help as possible out there in the ecosystem, and that is something I would recommend other young people as well if they're starting out, is to use the resources. Because when you're part of the ecosystem, you get to learn so much more. I had a background in construction, but not in business. I've not done an MBA. So there were a lot of things that I didn't know, like how to make a financial model or other accounting aspects of it, which I learned through the mentors and other people in the ecosystem. So that helped. In terms of challenge, I would say you just have to keep, trying and keep convincing people, and eventually it's really that one big conversion that needs to happen in every different startup. It's always that one big client that you need, and that would happen after like 20, 30 rejections. But once that happens, then automatically everyone else in that space will start to believe in you. That would happen, but you have to really be patient for the first one. And that is where collaborating helps. It gets you there sooner. We collaborated with Selco Foundation because we knew if we directly go to a government, they might not listen to us because we have no credibility. But when an international foundation goes with us and pitches for us, the government will be more receptive to what we have to offer. So yes. I think that's how we've gone around.
So actually, I think that you have given much importance to the contact first rather than building your own business model, because you know that you have to sustain the market, so you have to have some contacts as well. Ma'am, actually, you are going for an alternative version for a good material building materials that are already in the market. So was it very difficult for you to reach out to your end users and make them believe that it's a good material, it's a sustainable material, and will last much longer than that? it has the same quality as the conventional material that is available out in the market.
So we give with all our applications a 10-year warranty, which we started off doing with the same mindset that it will take time for the end user to believe in, to buy in. So along with the cost implications, while it seems more affordable, it's a big ask, to tell someone that you've seen a certain material for last 3 generations, and then we're asking you to just completely switch and use a completely new material. So that warranty, that cost, so this is like a lot of things coming together. They see that there are savings, there's proper certification done of a product. We're giving 10-year warranty, which is more than any product in India right now, whether it's a furniture or construction application. The maximum is 5 years that any player offers. So all of these things help whatever end consumers we have so far to really give in and write that check or give us that money and to test it out. And going forward, we are trying to find more ways to incentivize it for them to use it. Of course, focusing on the product more than anything, because we're a product-oriented startup. So it's always the features and the value that we offer in our product that really is the king more than anything else. So we're trying to get to our user more quickly in a more comprehensive manner. And now we're investing in a lot in branding and communication so that we can reach to them, to most of them.
Yeah, actually, you have actually that was the point, because you have actually stepped into a market which was actually drafted for generations. And in Indian households, it's very common that if you got hold of something that has been used from generations and they have full faith in that, it's very difficult to replace that. And you are actually trying to do that. That's very, very much actually required very much guidance. So your journey as a startup till now has been very phenomenal. And it's very inspiring also, because actually you are changing the trends in the Indian market. So are there any future targets that you look to achieve soon in the future?
Yeah, of course. So by next year, one of our main targets is to set up our own R&D factory in UP again, which would not only act as an in-house production facility, but also a research unit where we'll keep innovating. And as I said, the vision was to turn a valueless stream into a value. And there's so many more options of waste lying around, more than just one crop. For example, in the south, there's coconut husk, there's corn, there's maize, there is hemp. So many different products in different geographies in India and globally. So the R&D unit will help us to sooner come out with newer products now that we have figured out the logic behind one of them, how it works. And secondly, of course, to scale up, every startup has a graph, has a cycle. You have an ideation stage and then go to market and then scale. So we are finally at that stage where we are scaling up now. We have entered the market, we have the revenues, initial numbers that have proven the model, the price, unit economics. And now we are focusing on scaling up and getting into 20-25 cities in next 1 year, where we have a distribution model, where dealers have our products similar to other products. We have a network of 100-150 sustainable architects and designers pan-India who are aware of our product, who go ahead and endorse it to the builders and the government. So yeah, I think next 2 to 3 years, we're mostly looking to focus on scaling up and growth. And of course, that tunes into also raising investment for the same.
Pandey sir, are you able to hear us?
Ma'am, seems like little connectivity issue.
No worries.
Sorry about the network, ma'am. Yeah. Actually, yeah. So, yeah, you were saying that. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So you are audible, but you are having some network issue. Hello, sir.
Yeah, sorry about the network here. Actually, just a second. Hello?
Yeah,
I'm audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually,
I think his voice is breaking up. I'm not able to hear him.
Just Arya, are you having the questions?
Yes, ma'am. I have some questions. Ma'am,
Yeah,
I wanted to know that what code do you follow while doing structural analysis of your product? And I have checked your social media. Yesterday, you posted about a new, you can say, a new back box was there, sample box. I wanted to know that what was it about? I mean, what kind of products and techniques have you used with it?
Thank you. So we follow the same IS code that the BMTPC has. So the Indian industry, so the construction that we do is based on steel frame technology versus RCC. So in 2008, BMTPC approved LGFS construction, which is light gauge frame construction in India in different parts of the country. That is the code that we follow. So every time we do a new project, we do a complete structural analysis on StatFlow, following the IS codes for steel building. And then that designs are vetted by a third party, which is usually from the client end in our case. And once they have vetted the drawing based on the wind load and all the other forces, then it gets approved, and then the design and the fabrication team goes ahead to make the frame and the panels accordingly cut to size, and then the whole construction happens on site. The sample box that we posted about yesterday, so as I said, we are in the process of creating a network of architects and designers. So that is just a way of reaching out to them. So before Diwali, we are thinking of sending these small boxes made out of our own panels. So it's not made out of wood, but our panels, and it's polished. So you can see the raw fibers and know what it's made of. And each box will have a gift, our product catalogs and small samples of different sizes for the architect, so that they can know the varied applications that this material has, and to take the communication with them forward for different projects in future.
Yeah, actually, that's a very innovative idea, because ma'am, actually, you're collaborating with different architects and widening your team, actually, because the team is actually the brain of the company. So actually, ma'am, you said that you are going to establish an R&D factory for future research and development in the same field that they're going through. So is there any plan to widening the perspective of the company going in different fields of electronics, computer science, or mechanical, so as to provide a sustainable product even there? Like that benefit. Yeah.
Not right now. I would be honest, I don't think in the next 5 years we are diversifying in any other stream. But as I said, as our core is to find ways to utilize, untapped resource. Of course, there's opportunity. For example, plastic is a very good example. Plastic is a very untapped resource, and there's so much of it lying around, which creates so much nuisance. So if we can R&D and find a way to turn plastic into a building material, in what form, that is something we'll have to figure out. So of course we'll get into that space, or e-waste for that matter. If there's some ways to utilize some of it to act as like adhesive or aggregate to bind a fiber. So yeah, there's a lot of scope, but right now we're just focusing on, as I said, we have an idea, we have a business model proven. Now we are focusing to scale it up. Once it's scaled and it's taken care of, then we can look to diversify, because that would also need investment for us, and also to widen our team in different space. So then have more different kind of engineers or chemical experts to be part of the team, so that we can do that, or collaborate. So one of the best ways, as I said, is if you don't have something in-house, you can collaborate. So we're already trying to collaborate with few research universities in other parts of the world, in US, Australia, that is also working on similar process of converting agri waste into a building material. So if we can collaborate with them, we can sooner have a more viable way of using this product, more different applications, and get the product out with them.
Definitely, ma'am. And actually, I just said that this question. I just asked this question because when we come to harvesting the resources or harvesting of waste, India is a massive producer And as the digital age is growing, we are going to produce these waste more and more. So that can be a field of further advancement in your company.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think we're eventually reaching a place and point globally where, we don't have the leverage to see anything as a waste. We have to recycle and upcycle everything that is out there because we've already depleted the national resources so much that we're seeing the consequences. So yeah, there has to just be more innovations around upcycling materials, finding circular way of making materials. Definitely.
Yeah, so because actually you we have to learn from you because you have actually done that practically. That someone else is waste, it's your asset, and the asset lies around you. You just have to look for it. So yeah, ma'am, you have been through various phases in life, ups and downs. So is there any advice that you want to give to the young entrepreneurs out there who are actually want to change the trend of the industry, but they don't have those guts to step into an industry that has the conventional methods or conventional faith around them? Is there any piece of advice?
I think whenever we think that an industry is harder to get into, if you look at it in retrospect, those are the best places to work in. That means that there hasn't much been done. So you actually have a lot of, as I said, similar to an untapped resource, you have a very untapped industry where if you do something, it might take a while initially, it might take longer, but eventually there's such a big market. So for example, tech space, there's so many startups right now and you have to compete. You have to compete for the funding, you have to compete for the same set of consumers or users. But if you look at construction or you look at other deep tech industries that are just coming up, there is no competition yet. In most cases, you will have the first mover advantage. So I think often when people are thinking, oh, this is too difficult, no one has done this before, you should always see it from a different perspective. That means, okay, you might take a while to, prove the product. But once you do, you will have that advantage that you might not have in industry where there are already so many players existing and doing the same thing, slightly in a different manner. So I would say that's how.
Yeah, ma'am, actually, one of the most famous question in around me and around my team was that if you are actually working on an idea, so just why not ideate it, create advancement, prove your research and everything, and create file a patent for that, and get the patenting number and then sell that to a big company and just take royalty from them on the basis of licensing. So I think that you could have actually also done that. So because there are many big construction companies in India like Tata, ACC. So why did you do that?
I personally have a different perspective on patents. There are certain industries where it makes sense to have patents, but then again for a limited point of time. So for example, pharmaceuticals. Initially when patent was countries came up with the idea of patent to incentivize scientists and researchers to come up with new ideas. But what happened in the due process is that now patent is a very good way to kind of, create a firewall around your innovation and let no one know about it so that you can maximize the monetary benefit out of it. And the reason why we started Structure Eco was not to limit our technology. We were very clear from the start that we wanted to be open source because, as I said, I believe in the market opportunity. I believe that the market is so big. In India, every year we consume 2 billion bricks, which is a $20 billion industry. So I don't think that me or anybody who does the same, like even now there are 5 more companies doing exactly the same thing like us. Even together, I don't think in the next 5 years we can get more than 5% of the market or change 5% of the market to move towards this panel versus brick. And 5% of that market is $100 million or more than that. So I don't think there is any reason to, be narrow in your mindset that, oh, let's just have a patent because then in 2 years I can sell it and make money, which I'm not against that. But our motivation to start the company was not to just sell the technology, but it was to find the right sustainable business model or the way that the technology scales up, which is, I think, the best to be open source so that more people can tap into it and it can be different because if we are the only company doing this with a patented technology, it will take us 50 years to even make a dent. But if there are 10 more companies doing the same thing with us and creating an ecosystem, it might take us 10. And still, it won't affect our profits. To be very honest, there's such a big market. I think everyone will still be able to make money. That is not a problem. So yeah.
I think your company is setting an example that open source is not just limited to the digital platform or something like that, the GitHub and everything, but open source can be anywhere. You just have to share your idea and collaborate with different developers out there and let the technology grow, let the innovation grow. Because actually at the end of the time, it's all about the growth of the technology which you're looking for, not the money. Right, so actually, the last question for today, just that when you were out there in the architectural field, was your main perspective to make money or to make a change in the society? Because your company says that your company motto and the company guidelines or the company background is like you want to make a dent on the society, want to just work for the benefit of the society. So was that perspective from an earlier age or that developed with age?
I don't think either of these two things have to be like mutually exclusive. If you're running a company, one of your first responsibility is to make enough money to pay the people that are working with you, with your team. And we've been a bootstrap company from the start. And as I said, it was not just creating a sustainable product, but also a sustainable business model, which in my opinion is a model where your own cash flows, your own profits kind of runs the company. Of course, there will be moments where we'll be raising investments, but that is to scale up. That is to, invest in the R&D, but not to just, be able to pay our employees. So of course, if you're running a for-profit company, of course, you have to be conscious and be very clear on how to make money, so that the company keeps running and it's not, shut down. At the same time, if you have a business model, if you can figure out a model where your social or environmental impact, whichever it is for your company, and your profits, they go aligned. So it's directly proportional, not inversely, is what I think is the best model to have. So in our case, every square meter of the panel that we sell, we make money, and we are also offsetting the carbon emissions. So for us, it's never a question of, if we grow a lot, if we grow too big, will that deplete the environment? Will that affect, anybody else in the ecosystem in a negative manner, which it will not.
Yeah.
So then our scale is not at the cost of the environment, at the cost of the society, at the cost of some other community living in the country that is being affected. So as long as any service or product company can find a way to scale up that is not at the cost of these resources, then I think they should scale up as much as they want to, and they can.
That means that you and your company firmly believe that money and responsibilities go hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. And I worked in an NGO for a year in the village, and I had a choice that, should I start this as a non-profit idea or a for-profit? And that's a very fundamental question to ask, because that just changes your whole approach of addressing the problem. And I was very clear living in the village, working with an NGO, that I wanted to start a for-profit. The reason being that when it's a for-profit, you can decide and you are not dependent on someone else's grant all the time. So the focus is more on growth, the focus is more on the product. But if it was a non-profit company, more than half of my time would have gone into just, fundraising. And the moment any of the funds were not coming in, we would not be able to, focus on our actual operations. So I think the best way to make impact is to try and have a for-profit company. Companies that make profit, because if you're making profit, that means there's something inherently right in your business model that you've proven. Now, the only thing is that you have to make sure that it doesn't also create any offset in the environment or in the community around you in a negative manner. So as long as that's taken care of, that's the most sustainable, scalable way of addressing a problem.
Definitely, ma'am.
I I think we have lost the connection with Pandey sir again. Aditi, can you join us? Aditi, can you join us and proceed?
I think Pandey sir is back.
Hello. Yeah, sorry for the interruption again. Actually, ma'am, we got a question from our audience that what is the scope of reinforcement that we are using? The reinforcement material that we are using, what is the comprehensive strength, or is it good or bad than the conventional material being used?
Sure. So, as I said initially, so in our case, the overall technology that we use is a skin and frame technology. So one aspect is a panel and another is steel frame. So the steel substitutes concrete in our building, and the panel substitutes the bricks, the gypsum, wood for walling, ceiling, flooring, furniture applications. So that's how the overall envelope becomes comparatively more greener. We use light gauge steel framing, LGFS, which is a much more greener material to use versus concrete. And similar to concrete, there are specific ways of using steel frames. So there's thicknesses and gauge that we have to use for the channels that takes care of the compressive strength and the wind forces in different locations. And at the same time, our panels also have different densities. So each density comes with certain aspects. So a higher density panel of ours is waterproof, it's moisture resistant, 2R fire retardant, which is the requirement for the National Building Code for any exterior material to be 2R plus fire retardant. So all of those criteria that the BIS and the building code requires, we have that taken care of in our steel framing as well as the panels. And it's all been approved, certified. We are one of the 20 companies in India that is approved by the government and the housing ministry to build using the alternative steel frame technology versus concrete. So they have vetted the process.
Definitely, ma'am. And actually, that brings us to the end of this interview. Thank you very much, ma'am. We're highly obliged and we wish all the best for your future and your company. Now, I'm sure that your story will definitely inspire our audience and will give them motivation to just take such bold decisions and step out of the comfort zones and give priority to learning, not just earning.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just a second, ma'am. We want to take a snap at the
We want to take a snap out of this.
So, please everyone put on your cameras so that we can take the snap. Keep yourself mute, but put on your cameras, please. Everybody. Stop commenting, they are coming in the scene, please. Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining us and giving us your precious time. Thank you so much.
I'll now hand over the platform to my teammate Aditi Maurya for the further proceedings of this session.